Welcome to Diamonds in Dumpster Fires. I'm Melie, and this is the podcast for people who are determined to find a glimmer of hope even while the fires of life are burning around them. Together, we'll dumpster dive through all sorts of topics like divorce, dating, friendships, grief, career ups and downs, and so much more. All with a sense of humor and absolutely no toxic positivity. Are you ready? Let's go. Okay, welcome everyone. I'm so excited to dive into today's topic with you. Today, we will be talking about treasure in the trash, or another way to put it, how to find joy in difficult times. Today, we'll talk about why it's so important to try to find joy in your life no matter what you're going through. And we're also going to walk through some practical ways to do just that. As you probably remember from episode 1, I got divorced in the middle of the pandemic, and it took me a really long time to come to grips with my new reality. It took me even longer to find joy in it. And let me be super clear. When I say I found joy in those difficult times, I do not mean that I looked at everything with rose-colored glasses or with my head in the sand and said, "Oh, everything's just fine." Not at all. But as time went on and as I actually put some effort into it, I found little things to be joyful about along the way. So we're going to get a little bit of a deeper dive on what joy is and how it's not quite the same thing as happiness as we get going in this episode. But to start us off, I wanted to share a C.S. Lewis quote from his book, A Grief Observed. Now, he wrote this book after his beloved wife died, and he was really struggling through the grief of that. And in that book, he says, "The pain I now feel is the happiness I once had." Wow, that really hit me, and it's so true, right? I mean, I look at even in my own situation with my divorce. When I think about all the pain that I feel from that circumstance, it really is the happiness that I once had. The happiness of coming home to someone at the end of a busy day is now pain that I feel when I come home to an empty house. The happiness I once had about, just having weekend plans of maybe even just doing nothing together, sitting on a couch and just being in each other's presence, was now the pain that I feel when I'm sitting at home by myself and have no one to just share in life's little joys with. And I'm sure everyone has tons of these moments that you can look back on and think, wow, that pain that I'm feeling right in this moment really is the happiness I once had. And acknowledging that is not, an answer in and of itself, and it certainly doesn't bring joy, but hopefully it lets you see that this is the human experience and we all go through it no matter what we're going through in life. Look, this episode is called Treasure in the Trash because a lot of stuff that we deal with is still trash. I mean, I've been divorced for over 3 years now, and I'm still dealing with the trash of it. There will be more trash that collects as long as we go in life, but that doesn't mean that we can't stop for a minute and try to find those glimmers of hope along the way, those little glimmers of joy. So let's dive into understanding joy a bit. What exactly is joy? If you were part of the Marie Kondo fan club, you learned to question whether your possessions spark joy before deciding whether or not to keep them. Anyone else dive into this trend? Did you notice that she didn't ask us whether owning this shirt or this pair of pants sparked happiness? Because happiness is actually fleeting. It depends on our circumstances. No, she asked us whether it sparked joy. And joy is deeper. Joy can be felt in our souls. It's there through thick and thin. It isn't dependent on circumstances, and it's stronger and more powerful in our lives than just, say, happiness. But it can also be difficult to cultivate, especially if we're trying to do so in the midst of hard circumstances. And what does that actually mean anyway? I mean, it certainly doesn't mean that we're going to just all of a sudden be happy all the time, right? And it isn't just something that we can say, okay, I'm going to be joyful right now. No matter what's happening in my life, I'm joyful. No, not at all. I mean, that kind of talk, you hear it sometimes, but personally, I find it really off-putting. As somebody who has often lacked peace in my life, finding joy has been really difficult for me to bring more of into my life. And I get that for some people, finding joy is actually just something that you're tuned for. And if you're one of those people, that is so amazing. And I'm so happy for you. In fact, I'd love to maybe have you on the podcast to talk through how it is that you actually do that. But if you're like me and you lack peace and you seem kind of tuned for cynicism more than joy, you're in good company here. And just know you can still find joy. Also, side note, as someone who was late diagnosed with ADHD, joy has been something that has been particularly difficult for me to work on, but that makes it all the more important for me to actively work on it. As believers, we know the Bible has a lot to say about joy. One such verse can be found in Psalm 16, verse 11, where David is expressing his trust in the Lord and acknowledging the blessings God has given him. You reveal the path of life to me. In your presence is abundant joy. At your right hand are eternal pleasures. If you listen to this verse and you're thinking, yeah, that sounds great and everything, but how do I find that abundant joy? How do I find those eternal pleasures? Don't worry, we're going to get into that. One thing I do want to point out is if you grew up in the church or if you've been around it for any distinct amount of time, it may feel like joy is actually like a really Christianese kind of word. It gets thrown around a lot, it gets printed on t-shirts and mugs. But did you know that even secular psychologists and researchers recognize the importance of trying to find joy in hard circumstances? Apparently, not only does joy improve our moods and our general feeling of well-being, but when we live joyfully, we can improve our immune systems, lessen our feelings of pain, reduce stress hormones, and even relieve depression symptoms. Finding joy can actually even help us live longer. So, if you're not feeling the joy right now, let's at least commit together to work toward finding joy in little moments going forward. You with me on that? And before we get into the practicality of trying to find joy, I just want to acknowledge something. Pain and struggle are very, very real. There is no sugarcoating anything here. Life can be hard and painful, and there are circumstances that just seem to have no meaning whatsoever. I completely get that. And look, if you are really struggling, please, please, please know that there is absolutely no shame in asking for help and getting the help that you need, okay? I've been there. I have been through therapy. I have reached out to people within my faith community. When the pain and the struggle is happening, it is so important to acknowledge it and reach out for the help that you need. So if you are in one of those moments right now, the last thing you probably want to hear is the saying, everything happens for a reason. Do you hate that saying too? I mean, let me tell you, people would say that to me all the time when I was going through my divorce, and it drove me up a wall. Sometimes I would just sit there and keep a smile on my face and just try to act like, okay, yeah, everything happens for a reason. And eventually I got to the point where I was like, oh, really? Yeah, sure. Everything happens for a reason. What's the reason for my husband leaving me? Was it so that his new wife could find her? My loss, her gain. Ha ha ha. Come on, right? That doesn't help anybody. And if you are somebody who has told people, hey, everything happens for a reason, don't feel too bad about it. Look, I'm sure I've actually said that to people too, right? But just know that if somebody says that to you, they probably mean it in the absolute best way possible. But you can just kind of let it roll off your back if you can and just think, you know what? They mean well. I can just let it go. And a lot of times people say that because we don't get a lot of training on how to acknowledge people's pain and struggling. We don't really see a lot of that either. Everyone on social media, for the most part, is showing the shiny side of their lives. They're putting their best foots forward, showing us only the highlight reel of their lives. And most people are not going to post all the messy, dirty stuff. Unless you're me while I was going through my divorce, and if you followed me on Instagram during that time, I apologize because I very publicly bled out all over my channel. But you know what? That's life, right? It can be a temptation for many of us to just always show our best pictures, tell our best stories, and keep all the other stuff hidden, which can give a false sense that no one else is struggling. But we all struggle. I'm sure right now, as you're listening to this podcast, even if you're not going through it at this very moment, you can think of times where, you've had moments of struggle. We all struggle, and it is so normal and so part of the human experience. So if you're feeling overwhelmed right now, just know that's okay to feel. If you're not okay right now, it is okay to not be okay. But please, if you do need help, I ask that you please reach out to somebody that can help you, guide you, and get you the resources that you need. So we have talked about kind of what joy is. We've acknowledged the pain and the struggle of life. But how do we go about finding joy in everyday moments? What are some of the ways that we can practically add joy amidst pain in our lives, or even in spite of it? There are a few things that I want to share with you, and this is not an exhaustive list because if it was, we'd be here all day and all night, but here's just a few things that have worked for me that I just invite you to think about, maybe read up on, try out in your life. Number one is the idea of mindfulness and presence. And as a Christian, if you hear the word mindfulness and you're like, where is she going with this? Understand what I mean is just that power of being present and appreciating small moments. So what that looks like is just, if you're maybe really going through it, okay? You've got something going on in your life, things are not working out, but you decide to go for a walk. And on that walk, you happen to find a really beautiful rose, and you bend down and you smell that rose. In that moment, just be present. Just thank the Lord for making roses. Or maybe it's a dog that you saw along the way that you got to pet. That personally for me would do nothing because, sorry, I hope I don't lose listeners for this, but I'm not a dog person. But I understand the concept there. So maybe it's just being present with an animal, a pet, a family member, a friend. You get what I'm talking about. So just being in that moment, trying as hard as you possibly can to not let all the other stuff that's, flooding your brain, all the thoughts, the intrusive thoughts, the things that are getting you down, to be present with you in that moment. Instead, just be in the moment, appreciate the small things. And if you have a hard time with that, because let me tell you, I really have a hard time being present sometimes. My mind is always going a million miles an hour. So something that I do is I just talk to God in my head. I have a little saying or something that I say to bring me back into that present moment. I'll just say, Lord, be with me. And that brings me back into the present moment, and I can focus on just what is right in front of me. So other than mindfulness and presence, another way that you can start to find joy in everyday moments is gratitude practices. So I don't know if you know this or not, but just writing down a few things a day that you're grateful for can actually help you feel joy. If you are rolling your eyes at this right now, trust me, I would have rolled my eyes at this advice a few years ago, but I actually started keeping track of things I'm grateful for in a journal about 2 or 3 years ago, really around the time I was going through the divorce. And it's a journaling practice that I do most mornings, and I can tell you that it actually does help. No, it is not a magical pill that all of a sudden you'll write down 3 things that, you're grateful for and life will be all roses and glitter. But it does help you see little glimmers of joy in circumstances that you're currently going through. And it can also remind you of just little simple pleasures in life that you may have forgotten. Author Charles Stanley said, "Gratitude produces deep, abiding joy because we know that God is working in us even through difficulties." And when I say, writing down 3 things that you're grateful for, it doesn't have to be big, life-changing things that you're writing in your prayer journals. It can be little things like cozy blankets, fall weather. Of course, there's the big ones like family and friends. And let me tell you something, almost every morning, I'm not kidding, I write down coffee in my gratitude journal because Oh my goodness, if coffee is not a sign that God loves us, I don't know what is. But you know what? Sometimes I can't really think of anything that I want to write in my journal. Maybe it's raining, and to be honest, I hate the rain, so I'm mad at the weather. It's raining, I'm cold. I do have my coffee, and of course, I love that. But sometimes when I'm in that kind of a mood, I will just write down that I'm grateful for the air I'm breathing or the couch that I'm sitting on. So, if you're open to the idea, I'd highly recommend starting a gratitude journal. It can be a journal dedicated just to gratitude, or you can have it as part of like a bigger journaling exercise that you do, which is how I do it. So, I start out my mornings by writing at the top of my journal the 3 or 4 things that I'm grateful for, and then I have other journaling exercises that I go through. And let me just tell you, it has been life-changing for me, and so hopefully it will be that for you as well. Another idea in trying to find joy in those everyday moments is creating joyful rituals. So, what do I mean by that? Well, it doesn't really have to be anything big. Just find little things that you love and turn them into a ritual. And when I say a ritual, that just means something that you do on a consistent basis. You can make it as big or as little as you want. So, for example, maybe you really enjoy having a cup of coffee or tea in the afternoon during a break from work. Make that a ritual. Maybe have it in a specific place, or maybe there's a specific, flavor creamer that you put in your coffee and it just makes you happy. And so this is how you're going to start cultivating this ritual in your life. One ritual that I have really cultivated in my life ever since my divorce, honestly, I should have done it a lot sooner, but life got in the way and I didn't, was getting up earlier than I need to get ready for work. And instead of just getting up and getting ready and getting on with the day, taking time to have a quiet time with the Lord. So I get up, anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour before I need to start getting ready for work. And I spend that time with God. That's when I do my journaling practice. I have a devotional that I'm going through. I read scripture. I have a 5-year prayer journal that I write in, and I just spend that time with God. Sometimes that also includes just, singing lightly so I don't wake my neighbors, worship songs, trying to just kind of be in the presence of God. And depending on the time of year, this sometimes happens in the dark because I have to get up pretty early. But it is so worth it. At least for me, it has been so worth it to just get up and spend that time with God. Another ritual that I have in my life is knitting. I am an avid knitter, and knitting brings just huge amounts of joy for me in my life. There have been times when I've honestly felt like not doing anything at all, but then I'll get out my knitting and suddenly I feel like I have the will to live again. But this is just a caveat, so let me just be super clear. Knitting will bring you joy when you know how to do it. And I'm not saying learning knitting isn't fun, but don't try to learn knitting as a means of cultivating joy. Do it when you have some joy reserves built up, because honestly, it can be a little trying at first as you start to get into it. But once you know how to do it, if you're anything like me, it will fill your joy tanks right on up. Another option is working out. Some people may feel like, hey, that's not going to spark any joy in my life to work out. And honestly, sometimes I feel that way too, but I always say I've never regretted a workout once it's done. So once you get that workout in, those endorphins are, rising and you start to feel that joy might come after, still worth it, still counts as a ritual. One other, small way in which you might bring a little bit more joy into your life is handwrite a letter to a friend or family member. I'm probably aging myself big time here, but back when I was a kid, we had these things called pen pals, and I do not mean guys from the dating apps who text you for months or years on end without actually making dates with you. That is another kind of pen pal, and we are going to talk all about that kind of pen pal in an upcoming episode. But I mean real pen pals, people who lived in another state or another country, and we wrote letters by hand to each other, and it was so special when the mail came and you got that letter. And so if you also have enjoyed that in the past, maybe try it again. And if none of these ideas are sparking any sort of joy for you at all, that's okay. Find what works for you, and maybe you'll have to try out a few different things before you find something that works for you. It's totally okay. I think, honestly, the exercise of even just trying to find joy can bring joy sometimes. So, I would be missing a very, very big area of building joy if I didn't talk about community and connection. And before you say, Melie, I'm an introvert, I don't want a big community, let me say I am right there with you. I'm actually more of an ambivert, but I lean towards the introvert side. So when I say community and connection, I'm not at all talking about trying to meet a million people or join super large groups, but if you love doing that, then do it, because that can be a great way to find joy. But what I'm talking about can be as simple as finding just one friend to share with. Or maybe it's one family member that you can really talk to about everything. Just being in community with others can help you find the will to keep trying. It can also be incredibly therapeutic to meet others going through the same things you are. When I was going through my divorce, I actually joined an online community of people who were also walking through divorce. Typically, this group would meet in person, but as I've told you a million times and will probably say a million times again, I got divorced in the middle of the pandemic, so we had online or nothing. I'll be honest, when I first logged on to this group, I was super nervous. But one thing I did to kind of help my nerves a bit was I gave myself permission to just listen and not feel obligated to talk. But as the group was going, something really interesting happened. I found this group of kind and welcoming people who were all going through a very similar circumstance to me. They prayed for me. They offered to hear my story. And I felt like I wasn't completely alone. And no, that doesn't happen every single time. I've been in those groups before that are not exactly as welcoming and kind, okay? But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to find those groups. Try something out. It can be an online group. Even though we're out of the pandemic now, a lot of people really enjoy meeting online and doing Zoom calls. If that's you, there are so many groups that you can find to join. But if you're looking for more community in person, there's also a lot of ways you can find that. Just try to find some kind of community, whether it's one person, a few people, or an entire room full of strangers. If that is something that sparks joy for you, whatever it is, I just really encourage you to find that community. Another time that I really felt connected to a community was when I went to this Christian group at a church and we started talking about dating. In my case, I was having a really hard time of it. Still am. But in this particular group, I met someone else who was also having a really hard time. I was able to share with her this story about somebody that I had really connected with in a way that I thought was super strong, but he pulled away and he was one of those, we'll talk about this during our dating episodes, but he was one of those people that, acts interested, pulls away, acts interested, pulls away, and it creates this sort of dynamic where you're like desperate for their attention and you get this false sense of like, if only I could have this person, everything would be great. And they know that. These people know that, and not all of them maybe, but this particular guy knew it. He was honestly, I think, doing it on purpose. But anyways, we'll get back to that story another time. Back to this group, though. I had connected with this woman who had gone through a very similar story. So she shared her story with me. I shared my story with her. And it helped me realize that what I was going through was not at all unusual. It felt unusual to me because I had been a married woman of 14 years. I was not part of this new modern dating world, so I felt like something must be wrong with me. This is not usual. Something's off. But then hearing her story, I realized, okay, this is the world that we're playing in right now. C.S. Lewis is honestly the king of great quotes, so you're going to hear a lot of them throughout this podcast. But one that I really love when it comes to friendship is when he said, "Friendship is born at the moment when one man, or we can add woman here, says to another, 'What? You too? I thought that no one but myself.'" Or basically what he's saying is, what? I thought I was the only one who had felt this way, experienced this, dealt with this. You too? And that is where friendship a lot of times gets started. So, my friends, that is all I have for you today on this episode of Diamonds and Dumpster Fires, Finding the Treasure in the Trash, We talked about understanding what joy is and how it differs from happiness. We talked about acknowledging pain and struggle and how that is a part of the normal human experience. We talked about finding joy in those everyday moments and embracing community and connection. So what's next? Well, first of all, I would love to hear your stories. So if you could hop on social media, you'll find me at Diamonds and Dumpster Fires on Instagram. Share some of your own experiences of how did you find joy in everyday moments when you were going through something? What are some of the joyful rituals that you've been able to create in your life? And of course, please tune in for the next episode of Diamonds and Dumpster Fires, where we're going to be talking about the new year and how it's New Year, same me. We do not need to change everything about ourselves just because it's the start of a new calendar, but we will talk about some changes that we might want to make or ways that we can start the new year with joy in the midst of the fires of life. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and I will talk to you all soon. Thank you for listening to this episode of Diamonds in Dumpster Fires. Stay tuned for the next episode where we'll dive into more of life's big topics with a sense of humor and without toxic positivity. Please subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and if you could leave a review, that helps the show reach more people and change more lives. Thank you so much.